natural suspension is within your ankle flexion, believe it or not. So you see it more nowadays, like a lot of the top pros are starting to get on the balls of their feet and sinking their heels a little bit, and you see it a lot when we watch Supercross. If we see them going through the whoops, their ankles are dropping behind the foot peg on every single one of those whoops. That helps the bike absorb those obstacles a little more effectively. If we're riding through whoops on the middle of our foot, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get bucked over the front. You're going to get a lot of feedback directly into your body. And it's very hard to let that impact be evened out throughout the suspension the way it's designed to do so. Also, the other major issue is how he's standing is our toes are kind of angled outwards, like pointing away from the bike. When your toes are pointing away from the bike, it doesn't allow you to grip the bike with your knees naturally, okay? You always hear grip the bike with your knees, but realistically, we're not constantly thinking about gripping the bike with our knees, right? So you gotta get the feet right to be able to do it without having to think about it, realistically. So when our toes are pointed outward, if everybody can see, maybe you can see on the flat ground. I'm kind of doing a couple areas, but toes are pointed outwards. Let's say we're riding around on the track on our foot pegs like this. When I try to grip the bike with my knees, I cannot squeeze my knees together. I cannot get them to touch. So that right there is already a big no-no because we're going to be riding on the track with zero grip, zero control with our lower body against the bike. If we point our toes straight on, which a lot of people ride, and I think it's pretty acceptable to do this, you can get the knees to squeeze together to touch a little bit. It takes some conscious effort though. It takes some thought process to actually do that. If you can angle your toes in, not a dramatic like pigeon toe style, but just pinch the bike with your toes a little bit. So angle them in slightly. That's going to naturally squeeze that seat with your knees, so you don't have to think about it as much. Of course, there'll be certain parts in the track where you have to think about it a little bit more to squeeze tighter, but now we got a full contact patch with our knees at all times. That's very important. As soon as you break away from the bike at all, it takes that split second more to try to get those knees back in the last minute, and then you're already behind the 8-ball. So we can be in contact with the bike the whole time. You got less buffer zone to make mistakes, if that makes sense. So under toes. So those are the little ones that don't know where the balls of your feet are. Just think about the part of your foot that's right behind your toes, and that's where you want to be on the foot peg. It's going to give you a good area on the boot to grab the foot pegs. We don't want to be on our tippy toes, so now we run the risk of our feet sliding off the backside of the peg, and it gets really sketchy that way. So slide that foot up just in the right spot, right where he's standing on his foot pegs. And the Alpine Star boot could be right where the Alpine Star logo is, and I think it should be Fox, where the Fox name is on his boot. That's where the balls of the feet are as well. Once you're on the balls of your feet, now you can get that sensation of sinking the heels down past the foot pegs. When we do this, we don't want to drop our heels all the way to the ground and basically fully slack them out, because now you're defeating the purpose, right? You want to create a little bit of a bounce within the ankle flexion. Just so you can have that movement, so it's a free-floating movement and it lets the body naturally absorb. We push our heels into the ground and slack your heels all the way down, it's going to make it very rigid, and all that feedback will go into your body again, and you're running the risk of hurting your Achilles at that point. So, slight ankle drop just to get those knees to slide back a little bit. And that brings me to my next point. When we drop the heels, it should naturally slide those knees back a little bit where they're supposed to be, and the knees are supposed to be above the foot pegs. I would say at all times. Of course, not when you're sitting, but whenever you're in the standing position, the knees should never creep in front of the foot pegs. If you creep his knees in front of the foot pegs real quick, now all the weight's going to be distributed to the front of the bike, and that front end will become very reactive, and that rear end will become very unpredictable. We'll start hitting obstacles, the bike will start skipping around, and now a lot of your body's inertia is going to be getting thrown over the front of the bike, and it's going to be hard to control the bike at that point. Also, if you would let go of the handlebars real quick, and your knees are far forward, all the weight is driving him into the front of the bike, and now he's got all the weight to his quads, the front part of your leg. So if you're riding around during the stand-up drill here in a second, and you're feeling a lot of burn in this part of your leg, that means our knees are too far forward, okay? So sink the heels more, make sure those knees slide back above the foot pegs, and you should feel the weight down into your heels and in the back part of your leg. You should feel some stretching going on in your hamstrings. That's very normal, okay? A good indicator that your knees are also in the right spot is we should be able to look down. We should be able to see the whole top of our boot from all the way up here down to our toe. If you look down and you see your tippy toes or just your kneecaps, it's also an indicator we're a little too far forward, okay? Very important part of the attack position to keep that weight in the center of the bike. That's our goal with the sit down and stand up position, is keep that weight centered so we can adjust in micromanagement ways throughout the track to help the bike kind of handle the best way possible. If you're relying on the bike too much, it can't do all the work. If anything, it's going to spit you off more than it'll do you good. So let's help the bike out with our body positioning. So those 2 parts of the checklist. Feet's number 1, knees are number 2. Is there any questions about that part of the attack position so far? Right. We also want to make sure those toes are all the way against the frame, so we don't want any gap between the frame. create gap between the frame, we start to create gap between our knees, whether you like it or not. So get those toes slapped all the way against the frame. And if you struggle with doing that, just always do one of these things when you get on the bike. Just slap your feet into the bike as tight as you can. All right? That'll get you in the right spot. At the beginning stages, some of us might need to really think about these things, and that's okay. When you really think about these things, it might make you go really slow. That's okay as well. Okay? Sometimes it requires you to go super slow until you can build that foundation to where it becomes more natural. You have to trust the process. It's very easy to get discouraged, but I'm not getting any better. I feel like I'm not getting any faster. That's normal, okay? Let that happen, because a couple months down the road, a year down the road, you can look back and you'll realize how much you improved naturally when it really didn't feel like it. You'll feel like you're not putting much effort into going fast, and it will start happening. Well, then it goes to the third part of the checklist, and I would argue the third part of the checklist is probably the second most important part, because this is going to allow all the control of the dirt bike underneath you, and this will help you get out of scary situations really effectively. So, one more time, sorry, making me go back and forth here. So now we've got the feet right, knees right, but we've got to get the hips in the right position, okay? A couple of different things with the hips. We've got to make sure we have our butt kind of popped out off the back of the bike. We want to create an arch in your back, kind of how, what's your last name? What's your first name again? Jonah. So how Jonah has his back kind of right here is perfect. If you want to do it the wrong way, if you can. I know it's kind of hard. Perfect. So with a top rider, a pro rider like himself, it's very awkward to get in this position. But believe it or not, this is very natural for a lot of us. Rider on the track with a rolled back, and our butt kind of tucked underneath us like a scared dog. All right, this is our comfort zone, and a lot of people's, you don't have to stay like that forever, sorry. It's a lot of people's like natural tendency when they get kind of nervous or scared, we kind of hunch up and kind of lock into like a big ball on the top of the bike. It's hard to get out of that, but you got to remain confident with getting that butt off the back of the bike, because it's going to unlock the lower body. When we're butt tucked underneath us and we're locked in here, now our upper body and lower body are connected as one unit. So anytime that bike leans underneath you, your whole body's going to go with it. And now we're dropping elbows, we're getting really unstable with our balance, and it's hard to be confident and comfortable on the track, period, standing. And I know a lot of people, when we start doing our stand-up drills, that's the hardest part for them, to find that comfort, right? To find that comfort, think about it as you're going to get your chest low to the bar pad and point your chest up and out to the sky. That's going to help create that arch more naturally, okay? That arch is called the anterior pelvic tilt. That's the proper term for it. And for those of us that maybe lift weights or do like a deadlift, it'll be kind of the same movement where you're creating a flat back. You're not really bending your back at all. You're going down with a hip pivot instead of a back bend. That same movement's going to be on a dirt bike, okay? You go down to grab the bar, your butt kind of comes up the back, and you go straight back up with a flat back the entire time. That disconnection should allow you to lean the bike underneath you and remain upright with your upper body. You want to kind of tilt the bike underneath you with your See how he has a little bit of hip pivot and movement underneath him? That's very crucial when we get on the track to corner, period. The bike needs to lean when we're cornering. If you don't allow the bike to lean, you're gonna have a hard time making it around the corner, right? And then you're gonna be forced to start turning your bars. And when we turn the bars into the rut, what happens? You start to tuck the front, you start to just crash all over the place, because now the knobbies are grabbing the side of the rut, and we're not having a good time at all. So to lean, we need to have that hip disconnection so the bike can lean just subtly underneath us, and we still want to remain above the bike. Like I just said earlier, when we have those hips tucked underneath us like a scared dog, now we're fully connected, and when the bike leans, we're leaning, and we're very uncomfortable. So, butt off the back of the bike, arching your back, and now we're pretty dialed in with the lower body. Is there any questions about our lower body disconnection or our hip position? So, that's 3 parts of the checklist. Now, let's get the upper body. I would say the upper body becomes very crucial to allowing the lower body to do its job. So, for example, if we get the whole lower body correct, and then Jonah here ends up in this position, where's all the weight into his body right now? What's holding on to the bike currently? His arms. Okay? Now all that stress is in his arms, and the lower body is theoretically doing nothing. So this is a very dangerous situation to be in, because you go to accelerate, now you're death gripping, get an arm pump, and you're running a high risk of whiskey throttle. Not only that, but now when you're fully extended and you start to brake, now all that inertia is trying to throw you forward, and we're getting kind of catapulted over the front of the bike. So this is the chest position is very important to keep neutral with the body, and it's simply bringing the chest above the bar pad, and that's where it should remain. When your chin above the bar pad, that's where it should remain. If your chin is above the bar pad, it's going to keep the upper body in the right position. It'll keep you over the front of the bike. And now Jonah should be able to let go of the handlebars, and nothing should move. See See how he didn't go forward or backwards? That means that weight is in his butt, it's in his heel drop, and now he's locked in. He's very balanced. We all want to be here when we're riding around in the stand-up position. If you're unbalanced and you let go of the handlebars, you'll feel you're either falling off the back of the bike or you're going to fall over the front of the bike. So everybody wants to stand up on their stands. I'd practice that right now. Take those heels. We need to make sure those knees stay above the foot pegs, but what you will do now is as you roll the throttle back, you'll bring those hips towards the bar pad, but leaving those knees above the foot pegs. A good thing to do, and that's about perfect, so a good thing to do is keep that heel dropped as you're bringing the hips towards the bar pad and then bringing the chin over the front fender. That's going to be pushing into the wind basically, or trying to pull you at the back. And now you should alleviate a lot of the stress that's on your arms when you're accelerating aggressively within that attack position. So it's just a simple adjust forward when you accelerate, and when you decelerate, you just come back to the normal attack position. If anything, just get your chest even lower to the bike. That'll help you attack that braking zone big time. Okay? This back and forth movement might be a little awkward for some people, but it's very important to make sure that weight is properly distributed at all times. Like I said, when we are accelerating, I can demonstrate this on flat ground before we go out, so we have a really good visual on it. But we just got to make sure those heels are staying dropped. So we go to accelerate, we bring those heels up with our hips coming forward. Now we're just going to throw all the weight into our arms over the front of the bike, and it's going to get really sketchy. So always keep that weight into your feet, pretty much 100% of the time. Does that make sense to everybody?
With your heels dropped.
With your heels dropped. So that's exactly how you got to think about it. As you're accelerating, even still put that weight into your heel drop. Okay? So those knees will stay above the foot pegs. Any questions about that acceleration? Okay. Yep, and I'll get to that here in a second. So what he just asked is, I have trouble shifting when I'm standing up, which is a very valid question because not enough people ask that question, right? Because downshifting, hitting your rear brake might be pretty simple. So, sorry. Okay, one more time. So when we're in our attack position, we got to hit the controls. We simply leave those knees back, we slide our foot forward, hit the lever, and then bring our feet right back to the balls of your feet, right? So that's easy to downshift and hit the rear brake. Simple as that. But now we've got to upshift, right? When we upshift, it might become a little more difficult because we have to get our toe underneath somehow. And Jonah did a great example. You want to do that one more time? Upshift. So you might have your knee come forward just slightly, but you got to try your hardest to keep that knee back. You kind of rotate your foot out just slightly and get that toe underneath. Get your upshift and then come right back to the balls of your feet. The thing is, though, we usually recommend you get your upshift either in the air if you're getting enough air to do so, or simply get your upshifts sitting. So most of the time you'll be sitting on the exit of a corner, you can get your upshifts then. But of course, when we're doing this stand-up only drill, you're forced to stand the whole time. So you're gonna have to practice that weird movement to get underneath the shifter. I just highly advise you to really make sure those knees are staying back as far as possible. So we're not making a huge toe dip and getting those knees all out of whack. So even if one knee is going too far forward, that whole body will kind of follow. Now you're kind of coming at an angle, going forward, and it throws your balance off at the same time. Does that make sense? Okay. If you theoretically lock into our normal attack position, change very slightly depending on the obstacle. Let's say we have a long, flat jump face with not a lot of pop to it, then you can pretty much get to your acceleration position and keep that weight in the rear tire and kind of jump off the face of the jump as that. If we have more of a steep jump face with a steeper arc to the jump, we really want to remain neutral as possible so that suspension can compress and unload as natural as possible as well. If you start adjusting your body too much on the face of the jump, it's going to cause the bike to react differently as well. Especially off the takeoff and into the air, you'll get some weird pitching going on with the motorcycle. And as we get to jumps, like I said, I'll talk about that, I'll demonstrate all that, and then we'll get into detail about jumping there. But yeah, very good question. Most of the time, and especially at the beginning stages, we're almost locking in to this attack position. I know it sounds silly to not really move a lot on the dirt bike, but if you're struggling to find comfort, you got to start here. When you start building comfort naturally, then you'll start making small variations with your own style and how you ride. But it all comes back to this, okay? We watch Deegan out there, we watch Hampshire, we watch these super fast dudes do some crazy stuff on the dirt bike. But none of us here can mimic that. We got to understand that, okay? They can do certain things because they've perfected their craft and how they ride, but it's not a copy and paste kind of riding. You watch Jet, Hunter, maybe Chase Sexton at times, they're kind of a copy and paste kind of riding. They can do it at a super high level, but anybody at any level can kind of ride exactly how they're riding. It just won't be as fast at first, right? But it's the safest way to ride, and it's the most technically sound way to ride. Does that make sense to everybody? So you can watch certain guys, and I definitely did maintain full control, specifically with our lower body when we're sitting, so the bike can do its thing the right way. The cool thing is nothing changes with the feet. You still remain on the balls of your feet. Just how Jonah is sitting right here. See how his toes now just angled up a little bit, but the toes didn't really move. That's where we all need to be. The cool thing now is when you're sitting, You can even squeeze in with your heels a little bit, get that full contact with the bike, and you can squeeze in with the whole lower leg now. That whole lower body should be activated when you're sitting. Of course, not at all times, but you still want to maintain full contact so when we're cornering, we're not breaking away with the knees and losing control with the lower body. We also got to make sure we're sitting in the right spot of the seat. If we're not sitting in the right spot of the seat, now we're distributing that weight improperly, just like in the attack position. So that right spot is going to be one hand width from the top of the seat. So put your hand sideways, put it at the top of the seat, and you sit your butt right behind your hand. That's usually the money spot. On the Yamahas with the big gas cap, you basically just sit right behind that gas cap cover, and that's pretty much the good spot. If you look down in this position, you should, well, your butt should be positioned right above the foot peg. Well, at least pretty darn close to it. Going right here, your butt is directly above the foot pegs, and now you're in the center of the bike. That's going to allow the suspension to work as effectively as possible. And that's a huge, huge thing. A lot of us, we go from our stand-up position to our sit-down position, we just drop our butt almost straight down from where it was already positioned. Now you're too far back on the motorcycle. That front end's too lightened up, and it's very hard to steer. I'm sure we have all been in that situation where we come into a corner sitting, and that front end feels it's going away from us, and we can't really turn the bike underneath us. Most of the time it's because we're lightening up the front end too much. We need to apply enough pressure to the front and the rear at the same time. So sitting in the center does just that. There'll be certain times where people ask me, and I don't know if you guys have these conditions much around here, but if like it's a steep sandy track where you might need a little more traction to the rear tire, people ask if you sit farther back. Sometimes you see that, right, with people on the back fender. And I would argue at the beginning stages, definitely not. You probably just maybe sit an inch or two, not even a two, but an inch and a half farther back to the one hand width. That will put enough weight into the rear tire. All you should have to do is just push more weight into your foot pegs, and I'll let the rear tire eat a little bit more. So virtually you're always going to be centered in that bike for the most part. Okay? So one hand width, that's very important. We're engaged the lower body, and we still want to create that disconnection with our hips though. So the simple way to do that is almost have an upright sitting posture, like you're sitting at a nice dinner table. That'll kind of create that arch in your back and allow that lower body to be disconnected. If we all sit on our bikes like we're playing a video game or just hunched over like we always do with our core disengaged. We go here. Now the upper body and lower body are fully connected. So anytime the bike leans, we get a head bobble, we get an elbow drop. I see this all the time in corners. When we're going through corners, we get one of these weird twitchy movements. That's just because we're not engaged with our core. When we're cornering, we need to be fully engaged with the core so we can stay stable above the bike, and we can allow that bike to twitch underneath us. So if we have that weird, let's say we hit a big boulder of dirt or something, the bike twitches weird, we're not following that with our upper body. As soon as you follow it with the upper body, then it gets sketchy, it gets kind of nervous, and you stick your foot out to dab it, to save yourself, and then you're making 10 mistakes in one corner that didn't need to happen. So stay above the bike at all times, engage that core. And now with Jonathan engaging his core here, he should be able to get that bike to lean underneath him, just like when we're standing. And his upper body, his head and his chest, theoretically don't move. They stay stable right above the bike. That's exactly how we should all look. So, pretty simple. This is also a very weird thing for a lot of people to do. But think about squeezing those abs, staying upright. When I say squeeze the abs, don't squeeze them like you're trying to flex your abs. Just engage the core, okay? That makes sense to everybody? Core engaged, upright sitting posture will be pretty locked in. You can all practice that if you want. A little bit easier to do it sitting, and I really stress we all try to practice this as much as possible. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, but we're going to do feet on the pegs all day today, whether we're standing or sitting. All right. A lot of us use our foot as a safety feature, and we rely on our foot and our foot dab at that to save us in pretty much all situations. When we stick our foot out, it promotes us to roll our back when we're sitting, and now we're fully connected again. And now, anytime the bike leans a little too much, we're just hoping our foot kind of can stab the ground and pick us back up. We do that time and time again. If you leave those feet on and really stick to that, it's going to force you to stay stable with the upper body and then control your lean angle with proper throttle, with proper front brake, with all the proper tools that you have to control lean angle. Foot's out, we forget about all the proper tools that we can utilize, and we just let our foot do the job. And now you're opening up the door to get a knee injury or just cause more mistakes by getting ripped off the back of the bike because your foot's hitting the dirt. All those bad things. So feet on the pegs all day today. It's as silly as that sounds, okay? One thing I want you guys to keep in mind too is when we do the stand-up drill, you're gonna be keeping feet on, right? So if you go to those deeper ruts and you're standing up through them, that should let you know you can do the same thing sitting, right? We're standing with feet on, why can't we sit with feet on? Same thing. So try to get that kind of dialed in as well as we're doing this. Okay, so I'll get through the sit-down position here real quick so we can get back on the chair. You got a question?
What is
lower body's fully engaged. We got that disconnection with our lower body. One thing that we all struggle with is our elbows. To fix our elbows, it takes one thing to change that will usually sort it all out. So if everybody wants to do this the wrong way real quick, put your hands all the way up to the grip donuts. So your whole hand flush against the grip donuts, and then relax your arms. When you relax your arms, we end up into that elbow drop situation, and we've all been there, we've all done that. We end up here no matter what when we get fatigued, even if you want to. If you're trying to keep those elbows up, you get tired, you start cornering, we'll end up here because we're death gripping the handlebars at that point. If you look at the relation to our wrist and our forearm, when our elbows are to our side and we're death gripping, we're always with the grip donuts, our wrist and our forearm are in line with each other. So theoretically, if we have our hands up to the grip donuts, we try to crank those elbows up, now we're at a weird angle with our wrist and forearm, right? So it's not natural to stay there. The way to adjust that is to simply change up your hand grip a little bit. So create that diamond with your hand, and then keep that same angle and place that same angle onto your handlebars. It's gonna feel weird and awkward for some people. You still wanna be pretty close to the grip donuts, but you might have a slight gap between your thumb and your index finger against the grip donuts. And that angle is gonna help keep those elbows up more naturally. Now, when your elbows are up and your hands are angled like this, you can see the wrist and forearm are now aligned. It should be more natural to keep those elbows in the right position for at least a little bit longer, okay? This is the angle we're all looking for. We should all be riding like this. You might notice some of us, depending on how our levers are set up, we might be grabbing the rubber booty of our levers or the clutch perch or the brake perch. That means we just gotta get those levers driven in as far as they can if your bars allow it, okay? So we can maintain that same angle all the time when we're on the track. If our levers are too far out and we're having to kind of change up our hands just to access the levers, now you're gonna be back to square one every time you hit the brake or the clutch. So get those levers adjusted far in so we can keep this aggressive, steep angle with our hands. What you might notice with this angle though is we have a little bit of less grip strength, okay? That shouldn't be an issue because we just talked about a bunch of stuff that pertains to the lower body, and the lower body is what controls the bike for the most part. So even if you have a little bit less grip strength, oh, she just got stung by it. Oh, okay. If you keep that same angle in your hands and you let the lower body lean the bike appropriately or squeeze the bike appropriately, the hand grip shouldn't really matter, okay? Of course, there'll be certain circumstances where you're gripping the handlebars a little bit more than others, but the less we death grip our handlebars, the longer you'll be able to ride, theoretically, because you're not going to be getting a lot of arm pump. You won't be locking up in the hands. You'll be able to be a little more free with the upper body, as we should be. Like I said, it might take some time for some people. I don't expect everybody to be perfect in one day, because it's not going to happen. But just try to work on these things. Eventually, they'll start becoming more natural, more effective. So the hand grip is where we should be. This is all the appropriate sit-down position things, but now we've got to accelerate in the sit-down position from time to time. So when we do that, we simply do the same thing as when we accelerate in the stand-up position. We've got to kind of push our head into the wind. And simply when you accelerate, you got to be in tune with the throttle hand, and you pinch the shoulder blades as you do that when you're sitting. That shoulder blade pinch should be all you need. Even on a 450, you should never really go to a forearm pull and be yanking your upper body up with your arms. It should just be in the back. Squeeze the shoulder blades, the chin will come farther over the bar pad, and then you're pretty much good to go. You'll feel that weight kind of try to pull you off the back of the bike, but you're squeezing the shoulder blades into that power, yanking off the back. And when you go to decelerate or just slow down, you just kind of come right back to upright. You never want to get off the back of the bike because now we're promoting front end too light. So stay centered in the bike when we slow down and just remain neutral. I think that transition is pretty simple. We should think about sinking those heels and bringing that chest back to the top of the bar pad. So drop the heels, butt back, chin to the bar pad. And when you go to sit, basically just slide that butt forward, sit to one hand width, sit back to upright sitting posture. It should be a seamless transition back and forth. We should all be able to do this pretty easily, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And honestly, it creates less movement when we're riding. What happens is when we start taking the feet off, we start changing up our body a little bit here and there. It requires a couple more steps when you make that transition back to standing or transition back to sitting. And then it just makes everything kind of a little more monotonous. So, for example here, let's sit and then go ahead and sit and then sit your feet off. Now, if Jonah goes back to standing with his feet incorrect like this, he's back to square one, right? So a lot of times people go to sit and we get lazy with our feet. The feet kind of start getting out of whack a little bit. And then we go to stand and now we have to kind of readjust our feet, get everything back in the right spot. So I highly recommend us keeping those feet right even when we go to sit, so that transition can always be easy. And a fluid transition back and forth. Is that cool with everybody? That makes sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Pretty simple. I think this is gonna be a good thing to do throughout the day is just keep reflecting on what I just talked about. Okay? As simple as it seems, I'm going to be calling a lot of people out. Even in the big group, if I call you out in front of everybody, use that as a learning experience. Don't feel bad. It's for everybody to learn. The reason I call certain people out, and it's not like I'm calling you out to be a bad. I'm just saying I might just recommend doing something a little bit different or doing this or that. That's so everybody can see what you're doing and understand what they can fix for their time out there as well. So as each group is sessioning, guys, try to watch everybody else. Even if you're a higher level rider, let's say group 1's sitting watching group 2. Group 1 can still learn some things that group 2 is doing, regardless of what level of rider you are. So just keep that in mind as well. Any other the O'Neill gear right in front of me. Right there. Raise your hand. Yep, right there, right there. Yep, him. Raise your hand. Okay. Can everybody see where he's sitting? If you look directly out to where he's sitting into that rut, that's how far ahead I'm looking. Rule of thumb, technically, in a lot of rut situations, if we're looking at 10 to 15 feet out in front of our front fender, most of the time. The tighter that corner becomes, the closer you look to your front fender, but it should never be directly down at the front fender. When it's a tight 180 where you can't really see around the corner, maybe that gap closes up to like 5 feet in front of you. But that eye speed needs to continue to go faster than where your bike is at. If we lock into one zone, eventually our bike will run over where our eyes are looking, and we get all scrambled and we have to start trying to find a new spot to look. At that point, you're already blowing over the rut, you're already making mistakes. So we need to be ahead of where our bike's at. So at this point, I'm looking where the O'Neill kid is, where you just raised his hand. That's how far ahead I'm looking. I get halfway to this point, I would say about right here in the corner. Since you're off your bike, want to come a little bit closer to me? A little bit more, a little bit more. Well, right there. Right where 60 helmet, standing, raise your hand. If I'm in this spot of this corner, that's how far ahead I'm looking, right where he's at. I'm already transitioning my eyes before I even get to the point where I was looking originally, right? I'm already looking way farther ahead. I get past the first point where I was looking, so I'm about right here in the corner. More of the corner starts opening up. I get more visual on where the corner's at. I'm a little bit closer, a little bit right about there. So now the rut's starting to get deep about where he's standing. That's where I'm kind of scoping out with my bike. At this point here, my front tire is kind of funneled into a rut of some sort. So we can trust the bike a little bit. As long as we keep our body positioning consistent, I can trust that my bike's going to follow this path of the rut. So I'm looking about where he's at right now. I get halfway to that mark, I'm going to start looking through the corner even more. So we don't ever want to turn our heads and look away from the corner, but we still gradually track our eyes to the rut. So I will come a little bit closer. Oh, right there. At this point here, I'm looking past the halfway mark of the rut. Okay? And I'm just about entering it theoretically, right? I'm looking about halfway past. It's a really interesting rut. It allows you to promote eye speed very effectively because it's not super tight by any means. So I'll be looking about where he's at right now. I get closer to the middle part of the rut. I'm going to start looking out to the exit at this point here. I'm looking about right where it starts to elevate, kind of crest over. So about right there. Yep. At this point, when I start to stand my eyes to the exit, it's a perfect opportunity to start rolling on the throttle. A gradual roll on, so it's going to help pick that bike up out of the lean angle and start tracking the bike out where you want it to go. To remain off throttle, especially when it starts to incline, guess what's going to happen? The bike will keep falling to the inside, and then we'll start to force dab our foot. We'll start dropping the elbow, because there will be no momentum pulling you forward. You need to accelerate to pull the bike out of its lean. Does that make sense to everybody? So at this point, I'm looking out. It should be a gradual roll on. Rolling the throttle on, rolling the throttle on. As soon as I get past the main part of the rut here, I would say I'm looking to the face of that jump. The reason I'm looking to the face of the jump, it's going to keep me tight to the left. If I keep my eyes where he's looking right, where he's standing right now, and I don't really move him after this point, I'm going to keep going straight, almost theoretically go straight off the track. And then we'll be trying to curve the bike on the other track to make it stay to the left. So no farther than here, I'm going to be looking at the top of that jump every time and rolling on the throttle all the way to the jump face. Got a question? Because that impact will be distributed between the front and rear imperfectly, and it'll kind of make that spring rain to your body. So front tire first, front tire will come down, take up a lot of the impact, rear tire will come directly after that and push you through the obstacle. The bigger the obstacle, obviously it'll still be a heavy impact, but it'll help you big time. At Redbud, I don't know if anybody who've been here, but my first time doing the Pro National there's a triple, not the Larocco's Leap, but there's one in the back that's pretty darn big. And the year I did, there was like a Supercross style double right before it. So obviously with the Pro Nationals, you have to hit all the jumps like second lap after your first roll lap. So second lap I came around, hit the double, and I underestimated the triple. It's like a triple step up. So the backside of the landing's like that steep. So it's like you're gonna case into a wall. And I kind of just blipped over. I was on a 450. I thought I was going to make it no problem. I was coming majorly short. I was like, oh crap. Pitched the front end down, cased it front tire first. There was no issue. I literally pushed the obstacle. I was kind of amazed myself, actually. From that moment forward, I was like, all right, I'm sticking to that for sure. Every single time I come short on a jump, I'm doing that. I don't care what it is. And you can see it in Supercross when guys are very confident. They'll come short on a rhythm section that's peaked like this. They'll drop that front end first. It gives them the best outcome possible. Front tire high makes it very hard to control. It becomes very sketchy at that point. So we can even practice it on a super small tabletop like this. We can go land front tire first, just get that feeling down. Couple corrections we can make. Let's say we're taking off the jump. We accidentally extend our arms and we're going nose high. Simple fix, pinch shoulder blades, get that chin farther over the front of the bike. It should drop that front end down where you want it to be. Okay? We should always try to land a jump. If we're making it to the downside, we should always try to land at the same angle as the landing is. Okay? So the bike has the easiest landing possible. If we're coming down the landings like this and we're coming down with the nose high, that'll create that slap motion even when we're making the full distance. So try to follow the arc of the natural jump and you'll be good to go. Is there any questions about jumping before we session it?